Okay, so a little bit about me. I feel like most of the people on this webinar already know who I am. So Rachel Jacobs, founder of e-commerce partnerships and e-commerce agency growth. I was COO of one of the top Shopify Plus agencies in London, and we were the first early adopters of some of the bigger platforms like Recharge, Gorgeous, Klaviyo, some of those solutions. I built out what is now a retainer model. Back then, we didn't really know what we were doing, but built out the first European retainer model for Klaviyo services. And, now I work really closely with Klaviyo, supporting their agency team and working with a lot of their agencies. And really, my area of focus is just helping agencies scale. I do have a specialization in getting agencies ready for exit. So whether you sell a business or just step out of the day-to-day, it's the same. Essentially, for the most part, it's the same, apart from some of the numbers towards the end. So all of the systems, processes, frameworks, best practice, all of that stuff that pulls an agency owner out of the day-to-day of the business so that they can then focus on actually growing the business. Scaling internationally is one of those topics that agencies use as part of their growth strategy. And there's a lot of very impulsive decisions and potential or perceived opportunities that people jump on, and it doesn't end up working out because they didn't plan it out properly. So a wee bit more about, I don't know how many slides I have here. Okay, a bit more about me. So we're coaching agencies, but we also have a private agency community. Some of the people on this call are already members of that community, which is great. And we meet up all over the world for lots of different reasons. So we just had Edinburgh a few weeks ago for the UK summit. We have the US summit in Austin just after Shops on Vegas. And then we have the European agency summit, which is based in Spain. And those bigger flagship events, which is over 2 days, starts with sports, ends with an after party, and then lots of workshops, roundtables, speed networking, lightning talks, master classes, all of that across the 2 days. It's exclusively agency focused. There's no sales. It's just purely focused on helping share insights from me and from other agency owners and agency coaches that can give insights specifically for agencies in our industry. So that's worked really well and it's brought a lot of value. In addition to that, we have a lot of fun. We're a really fun group. I've got end of year agency retreat happening in Gran Canaria in October, and we always have it in Gran Canaria at the end of the year. I live here. And that's our big focus is preparing your marketing strategy for the year ahead and preparing your operations, your P&L for the year ahead. They're the two big objectives and deliverables on the back of it. Of course, there's boat parties and there's dune buggies and there's shenanigans and beach parties and jacuzzi parties and all sorts of stuff that happens around that. So it's a really nice time, but that's for our little private group of agencies, which is fun. So anyway, that's enough about me and what we do in our community and how I support agencies. So for people in the chat, again, I'll keep a wee eye on this. People in the chat, what I wanted to ask is, anybody here, I don't know if you can put the hands up feature on this one, but anybody here that is currently working with international clients, whether it's like a hands up, raise your hand, or put it in the chat. Yeah. Okay. We've got one person in the chat, so that's good. We've got one person who works with international clients. So I guess next question is, how many people here want to work with international clients? I assume more. Okay. Well, they're needing questions. All right. Perfect. One person said yes. Another person said yes. Good enough for me. So really what I've done is kind of broken this out into 4 key sections. And this is all based on my experience with the agencies I've worked with. I've seen some agencies do this very successfully, and I've seen some agencies do this horribly, like really horribly, and it's been a complete disaster and an absolute waste of money. And I think it's impulsive decisions. Sometimes they can work, but in many cases they don't, especially when it comes to business. So I've broken it into 4 logical sections in my mind. So what to consider before you expand or you look at international expansion, when is the right time to actually expand, how you actually do it, what my recommended or step-by-step framework kind of looks like. And then I've broken that into quarters. And then what your expectations or realistic expectations look like. So when do you expect to see success and what does success look like? So first things first, before you expand, the most important takeaway here is market fit is not it doesn't necessarily transfer to different markets. So just because you're a good market fit in your specific market doesn't necessarily mean that that is automatically going to transfer over to different markets and you're going to be able to hit the ground running there. And I think that's a common misconception that people often have when it comes to scaling internationally. That's for a few different reasons. First things first, which I think is a big one, which is often overlooked, is cultural differences. There's a massive cultural difference in buyer behavior. I always use this example because I think it's so relevant for a UK market. When it comes to agreeing budgets, they're a lot tighter and a lot more conservative, and you really have to prove that you're the right person, and then they're going to look at a lot of different options. For a German buyer, a lot of that is through trust. A lot of that is through people they trust and through referral. For a US buyer, typically, if you can prove that it makes sense and it's worth them investing the money, they will take the risk and they will trust you and give it a go for the most part. And they're willing to invest much more money. So if I'm used to selling to a American buyer that it's like, okay, as long as it makes money, it makes sense, then we can do business together. And then I try and translate that over to a UK buyer, I'm going to lose time and time again. Or if I'm going to translate that over to a German buyer, I'm going to lose time and time again because I don't have the connections, I don't have the references, I don't know how the market works over there. And another thing as well that I've seen go really wrong and resulted in the failure of a attempt at internationalization is not being mindful that creatives and copy and how you communicate and position yourself doesn't necessarily translate internationally. I'm Irish, so what you can get away with in an Irish market is absolutely not the same as what you can get away with in an American market or perhaps in a Dutch market. Our style of communication is a little bit more cheeky and playful, and we can get away with that, and we don't take ourselves too seriously. You wouldn't get away with necessarily the same style of communication in different markets and vice versa. So really being mindful about how communication is received on the other end and making sure that that's aligned. And then additionally, which I think it's an obvious one from my mind, which is why I put it last, but it's something that doesn't seem to get enough consideration, is the fact that different geos have different expectations on agency models. So what services look like. So for example, the European model is in general much more comfortable with a full service. So everything all under one roof, and they're much more comfortable with that. The European market is much more open to having different services. So you have a standalone for this and standalone as opposed to one thing wrapped in. So again, that's not the case in every single instance or for every single profile of agency, but generally speaking, there's a big difference between the two. So if you're positioning something in a certain way that you're saying, oh, I've got a full service agency, I can be all things to all people to an American customer, then for them, it's like, well, you're not a specialist then. If you're a generalist across lots of different services, you don't have a specialization in this specific offering, in which case I would rather pay more money for somebody who is only focused on doing this specific thing because they're going to do it better. So really what I would encourage agencies to do or businesses to do before you look at expanding internationally is really make sure that you validate the demands. And I'm going to give you examples and give you practical action items on how you would do that. But make sure you validate the demand and ensure that you have clarity on the expectations in the market that you're looking to penetrate. And like I have here, local proof is much more important and more valuable than a global assumption. So my assumptions of what it is to scale into a different country is not nearly as important as actual proof of something being valid or valuable in that area. Another thing as well that's very easily overlooked is the fact that systems and processes are not a simple copy and paste job. There are some instances where you can take a process or a system or a way of working or tools and you can lift and shift. So you lift it from where you are and shift it over to the new market, and that can work perfectly well. But that may not be the case. Things that people often overlook is time zones. I know that asynchronous communication, where you're communicating in different time zones and they pick it up in their time and then you pick it up in your time, and that can work fine. But for the most part, if you're working with a brand that's paying you, or working with a client that's paying you to support them, and then you're picking up the communication 12 hours later on an emergency issue, that's going to be a problem. So making sure that you have the right internal systems and processes and response times and expectations and set those expectations up with customers. Another thing as well, very boring, but also very important when not done properly, is compliance. Over in Europe, I know in America it's like the Wild Wild West. You can basically take people at the back and shoot them. But over in Europe, with all GDPR and all the rules and regulations, it's a lot tighter. So making sure, I had an agency that I worked with for a while, and they were very successful in the US market, and then looking to expand into the European market with a specific niche of brand that they were supporting. But they hadn't really factored in a lot of the compliance issues over here in Europe. And then when they tried to get started, they just kept coming into roadblocks over and over and over again because the laws just weren't the same. And that was something that could have been addressed in advance had they had somebody who was boots on the ground, who understand the local compliance and laws. I have other example of agencies who have done that really, really well because they have somebody that has experience and expertise in that area. Another one as well, this happens all the time. I mean, everybody's complaining about burnout all the time anyway. But if you have a team that's trying to service two different time zones or multiple time zones, you're going to burn that team very quickly. And if you burn the team, the quality of work is going to suffer. The quality of the work suffers. The clients are going to complain, client churn, employee churn. And then it's just a vicious cycle of chaos. And as a business owner, that's just, it's absolutely detrimental to growth. So really, I would encourage you to think, once you have enough momentum in a new geo or a new location, build regional specific delivery pods. Make sure that all of your reporting and your tools and your systems are automated as much as possible, and that all of your I would call operational playbooks. So your standing operator procedures, your processes, your systems, all of that stuff has been localized for each market that you're working in. So that's the second point. The third point then is positioning. And this is like agency 101. I feel like the amount of people that I speak to about scaling their agency, they're having issues with sales. For the most part, sales is very rarely the issue. If they're out of 100 agencies, maybe one or two of them actually have a sales issue. For the most part, your issue is your marketing. And even deeper than that is your positioning or your niche as an agency. So being in a new market or being on a global stage, it's much more competitive with people that already know the market, with people whose names you already know, with people that are local. So when you go to a new market, you have to accept that you might be the big dog in the market that you are, but going to a new market, that doesn't necessarily translate unless you've already put the work in there. You are going to have to, in many cases, start from the bottom and work up and go from being a nobody to then growing your profile. So the recommendation obviously is to focus on thought leadership on a global scale, and then leveraging that thought leadership with case studies that are relevant to the new location, and then using that as an opportunity or a springboard to then grow in that specific market. But it really means that you should have proof of concept before trying to scale and get off the ground there. You cannot go in with the same. I've seen this happen and just not work very well with agencies that move to new territories and are very, very successful and very well known, and they can throw their weight around because they're well known and they have a good reputation, and they go to a new market and everybody's like, who are these guys? I don't know them. I don't care what your marching orders are or what your demands are. Makes no difference to me because I don't know you. So positioning is absolutely essential for as an agency. If you don't have a clear positioning, especially in a new market, you then get seen as a generalist agency. And like the example I gave before, a generalist agency, you don't have the expertise, you don't have the depth of knowledge for brands that really are looking for somebody to go the distance with and have a long-term partnership. They're not looking for somebody who can be all things to all people. So for me personally, my recommendation is focusing on one specific location. So in this case, I said here, either the German market or Dutch market or UK or US or whatever, Australia, whatever those markets are, picking that one, focusing on a very specific niche. And I call this strategy land to expand. So you land in there, you focus on a specific niche, very, very focused case studies, very specific marketing, very specific partnership strategy. Then once you get in there, you can then go wider and offer more services, or be much more broad with what you're looking, what you're targeting as an agency. So to get momentum and to get progress, you really need to go in with something that you can really dominate and own. Navigating two screens here, which is definitely not my skill. Okay, so that was the first section, which was before you expand. So first things first, making sure you have market fit, making sure that your systems and processes stand up internationally, and also making sure that you have a very clear positioning and niche in the market so you can stand out from the crowd. So those are the things that you should consider first. Like they're just the foundations before I even expand. Have I considered these things? Now, the next thing is, when is it time to expand, or what are your reasons that you should be expanding? Just because, they have an expression in Spanish, or expression here that they use a lot. I don't know if it's common in the mainland, but there's money on the street everywhere. So everywhere you look, there's always opportunities. So just because there's an opportunity, it doesn't mean that it's your opportunity. Just because there's money to be made doesn't mean the money is for you. And I think that that's something as an entrepreneur you really need to consider. And if there's an opportunity, you need to make sure it's aligned with your goals and your vision as a business owner. So reasons to expand, obvious ones is there's higher revenue potential. If you look at European budgets in general, so I have here on average across Europe, is around 120 euros an hour, give or take. In the US, that's 180 to 220 an hour on average. Even when you factor in the conversion rates, that's a significant bump. I mean, if you could then have that bump of 20, 30, 40% hourly rate with your current European clients, that would, you'd have to do a lot less work for the same amount of money or even for more money. So there's a significantly higher revenue potential in a new market, then that would be something that would be a reason that you could consider expanding into that market. Also, if you're an agency that is planning to turn your business into an asset that potentially would be valuable to a future buyer, having international brand presence and brand authority at an international or global scale, again, depending on the buyer, is extremely valuable. So if a buyer is looking at a business that has a specific niche but has international presence, there is, again, depending on the buyer, there's the potential to earn a significantly higher multiple or get a higher multiple on your business because you've already scaled internationally. Again, that ties into the next point. So brand perception and authority really ties into the valuation. Not only does that attract bigger buyers and potentially higher multiples, it means that you're perceived. The reason that you get higher multiples is the perception is that you are deemed less of a risk because you have this international presence. But if, for example, this location isn't as strong or doesn't take off, we got this one that's really going very well. So I know that I can make this investment and I'll make my money back. And then finally, niching as an authority, having a very specific niche or vertical or area or USP that you're focused on, it allows you to scale globally much quicker. And it really enforces and reinforces you as a thought leader in your space. So these are areas that I would say when I look at a business and I'm like, okay, what is the reason that we're going to be scaling internationally? Well, there's money on the table here. I have, starting from the bottom, I have the niche. I'm a thought leader in this specific area. For example, subscriptions with CPG brands doing over 20 million or 50 million. Okay, I have that market kind of sewn up here in my location. I'm top pick for my specific location. I have some clients that I'm working with here that have international presence and we've helped support them internationally. So I have those case studies. There's much more money potential in this bigger market, and this one we kind of dominated. So now it's time to kind of set up shop over here. And then your branding and the goal potentially then, if M&A is in mind or you want to look at increasing your valuation for sale at some stage, then you know that you have that extra market where there's so much untapped potential. So these are reasons that I would consider that are legitimate reasons. Equally as important to reasons why you should expand are reasons to not expand. And these reasons to me these are the don'ts. These are the reasons that I've seen it just not work very well. First things first, if you don't have a scalable or repeatable systems process delivery framework, you're not ready to scale. If you're scaling into a new market or into a new location will expose all of your weaknesses as a business. So the first things first, you need to have your scaffolding or your framework as a business. It needs to be airtight. Another reason that I would encourage agencies not to scale is if you're a generalist or you lack a niche. Those two things are kind of similar. But being a generalist agency where you're all things to all people, if it's e-commerce, I'll do it. If it's real estate, I'll do it. If it's, dentistry, I'll do it. If it's, whatever construction, then we'll work with those guys. So if you're working with lots of different people and you have international opportunities, it's going to be really difficult to scale that. It's not that you can't make business in different areas, but you're going to be then moving multiple different locations or different markets forward at a very slow rate. So if I said it once, I'm going to say it 10 times. Having a niche really is the fundamental key to success when it comes to making a new market successful. Another reason, if you are below 50 to 70K a month, I would say don't scale internationally. I don't think there's enough financial stability or support there. Or if you're still building your cash flow. So typically for me, I think that for most agency, usually between 6 months to a year before you really get a solid foundation in a new market. If you don't have at least 6 to 9 months of cash flow saved. So for example, if your monthly overheads are 50K, then you need to have 6 to 9 times those monthly overheads. And that's monthly costs that cover everything to pay all the bills and the employees. If you don't have that money in the bank or access to capital that can cover that cost, you're not ready for global expansion because it's expensive and it costs more and it takes much longer than people expect. There's some agencies I know that have invested years into making it happen and they've kind of been half in, half out, and it's been very expensive. Another reason as well, and I see this happening so often, is relying on one team member to make it happen. So I've got my cousin and he's got a connection and that person is going to make things, hit the ground running and they're going to be the superstar and they're going to be our silver bullet. Relying on one person to make things happen, that either person is going to crash and burn or they're going to fail. It's just way too much pressure. So making sure that it's more than just reliant on one person's contact or one person's ideas or one person's enthusiasm. And then finally, another reason to not expand, and again, this is probably one of the main reasons that people consider global expansion, is people think it's a silver bullet. They think it's a magic fix or a magic solution to all their problems. And that's just not the case. There's a lot of thought. You need to be very intentional if you're going to scale internationally. It's not just something you're like, okay, we're going to do this, and then up and it works and everything is working beautifully. It's not. And if you have that strategy, you're going to fail. And then the last thing for the second section, so the one was before, this one is really identifying when you're ready. And then after that, then we'll move on to how to scale internationally. So really preparing to go global. So some of the things that I would always recommend with an agency or that an agency needs to prepare before they go international. First things first, like I said, again, I've said it 50 times already, is niching. What are you known for? Even if hypothetically in your local markets, your current market, even if you're more of a generalist, so for example, you're a Klaviyo agency, which in my opinion is a generalization. There's way too much competition to say that being a Klaviyo agency is a niche. It's not. Or I'm a Shopify agency. Unless you're in a market that Shopify hasn't even grown in yet, and you're a Shopify agency, then you could be top of the market. But otherwise, it is not enough of a niche. So understanding what is my specific area of focus. If in my local market I have more of a generalist, and I've done relatively well, and I have good referrals and I have good contacts. In my new market that I'm looking to expand to, that is not necessarily going to work. Or my recommendation would be to niche down even further and say that I am Shopify agency for subscription brands that are in this skincare space or the pet industry, doing over 50 million, something like that. Next thing would be case studies. So having a niche allows you to then define what your case studies are, and those case studies should be relevant to that specific niche. I would say on average, having 2 to 3 case studies that show international presence or international expansion or or omni-channel, and then having those case studies that are longer than just a specific project. So a good case study, and this is a totally different webinar series, but what makes a really good case study? A good case study is something that is not just, here's the problem, here is our recommendation, and here's the outcome. That's not a good case study. A good case study is, here were the problems, here were the metrics, here was our roadmap, And here is where we are now. And here are the metrics over an extended period of time that we've been working with these clients. So having good case studies and then making sure that your operations are scalable. So that scalable in the sense that your team can serve clients across different languages, different markets, different currencies, different time zones, different ways of working. So making sure, do we have a defined niche? Do our case studies back up and verify that we have expertise in that niche? And is our team and our systems ready to support scaling internationally? Some of the things as well, which I think is good to consider. I don't think necessarily this is the most important thing, but compliance. We already talked about making sure that everything you're doing is compliant in the area that you're in. Making sure that if you're expanding into new markets that have a different language, that your team can support different languages and different time zones. And then additionally is pricing. Going into a new market, that their pricing is significantly higher. For example, if you're 120 and they're 180 and you go in at 120, okay, you might think that that's a competitive advantage, but ultimately all you're going to do is you're going to drive prices down and you're going to be perceived as somebody who's just cheap and you're going to miss out on money. So that's not what you want to do. So we're pretty much on track, which is great. Done the first two sections, which is before and then when, and now is how. So this is like a little framework that I've put together. Like I said here, what I would encourage agencies, just like when you're launching a new service, just make sure you have proof of concept before going all in. I want to make sure that I have at least 6 to 12 months proof of concept, that I have an established foundation or a base in that new market before I then go public and start telling everybody that I'm the all singing, all dancing machine over in this new market. So here is what I typically recommend for agencies that are looking to expand internationally. And depending on what stage you're at in this process, you may be, this is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and beyond. You might be at phase 2, you might already be in phase 3, but I think it's really helpful to look back at some of the foundations. So the first step is laying the foundations and validating this idea. So just like you were going to launch a new service, you're launching a new market. So the first things first would be to audit the existing clients. So looking at the existing clients and really figure out which of my existing clients in my local market already have international presence. How are they managing international? Are we supporting any of those? Where is their opportunity? For example, it may be a UK-based client that is expanded into the US and they're looking to expand further into APAC. And there are 3 markets, all English speaking, different pricing, different cultures, but at the same time, the language is all the same. So it's one less thing you need to worry about. So really looking at your clients and thinking, well, do you have a presence? Like look at your numbers. Let's see how much of your client base comes from the UK or Europe or US or APAC or whatever. And I think being proactive with those clients and saying, listen, it looks like you have an increasing interest and increasing customer base in Australia, which is something that's grown quite significantly. And there may be different reasons. Maybe there's a few influencers over there that really like your products. So is that something that we need to cater to those clients better? Do we need to have a market that's dedicated for them and like the way they speak, the way they communicate, what they expect from their sellers? Local proof. So you've audited the clients, you've seen a couple of clients that you've already helped with international expansion, and then you need to start documenting and building your proof. So case studies to show strategy, execution, measurable results across different regions. So we took this client, this is what they wanted to achieve, here's how we get there, and this is where they are now, and metrics to kind of fit into it. And showing as much of your technical expertise as possible. So, like I said earlier, multi-channel, multi-region, platform localization, currency localization, language localization. There's all of these different things. Integrations with different ERPs and PIM systems. So showcasing your expertise that you can navigate the complexity with warehousing being in a specific place, international shipping solution, and then everything then being distributed correctly in the communication. So that's the sort of stuff that if a client or if somebody is looking for support with internationalization, they need to know that you actually understand what that means. So that's your next step. You've got your current clients, you've got the clients that you've already supported with this. Then you document their process. Obviously, when it comes to, again, case studies is a totally separate conversation all by itself. Anybody who wants any resource on case studies, let me know if I've got a ton. But you really want to be able to document the journey that you went through that client, but just make sure that they're happy with the information you put out. What you don't want to do is put out so much private information on a specific journey that you went through with the client, and then competitors then are looking at that, and the client then is thinking, "Oh, you betrayed my trust." So just making sure that we're all happy with the information we're sharing. And then next thing is to kind of define what your international offer looks like. So whether that's having a dedicated deck or a landing page, and really double down on what that local market sees as most valuable. So it could be best in class, it could be fast service, it could be a big focus on ROI and data-driven results. So depending on what the perceived value is from the target market, really making sure that your positioning to them is aligned with what their expectations are. And then finally, make sure that you're ready to take payments. Like that's super important. It doesn't mean, again, if you're a European and you're expanding into the US, it doesn't mean that you need to go to Delaware and set up a company over there. It means that you need to have systems and payment processors that are going to be able to take payment. Well, we all know when it comes to payments, certain countries they just focus on when it comes to paying bills. If they can't put it through their banks, and they don't really know how to function properly. So just making sure that you can have everything set up in place, that as you set up to scale internationally, those new markets and those new people that you're targeting, you're able to actually receive payment from them. And then phase two. So phase one, foundations. So you're validating the concept, you've laid the foundations. Then phase two comes down to your positioning and your network. And ultimately, for me personally, I think that partnership strategy is absolutely fundamental when it comes to scaling internationally. So if again, the example of a European agency that wants to scale into the US, making sure that I have a list of complementary US-based partners. So if I'm working very closely with 3 or 4 partners, really closely with 3 or 4 partners over here, then I'll be speaking to those partners and say, can you connect me with your US counterpart, because we're looking to expand in that market. And then really picking their brain and finding out from them, like, how are they working with their agencies? How are they supporting their brands? What's the different, like, what sort of trends, what difference are they seeing? And then to my next point, so your partnership strategy. So of course, partnerships can be tech partners, platform partners, complementary agency partners. But the tech ecosystem, especially in our e-commerce industry, you need to leverage that. So making sure, can you build these relationships over Zoom calls? Possible, not likely. A lot of these conversations are done at a bar, at a restaurant, at events, at sports games, at after parties. Like that's really where these relationships are, because the people that you genuinely and genuine relationships. I'm not talking about like be friendly to everybody and everybody loves you, but it's not real. It's just kind of surface level and fake. I'm talking about like building real relationships, and the people that you want to work with and want to work with you, they're the ones that they're going to go the distance with. So it means that you should be investing. If that's a market that I want to expand into, I have got to be there. I can't expect that in my market, people know who I am. I have a big reputation. I've got a big mouth, big attitude, and I go over there and I'm nobody. Like, how can I expect I can just go, oh yeah, I've never actually been in there, really know your market. I don't have time to really go and attend any of your sort of stuff, but this is who I am. This is what I have to offer. That just doesn't really work. It doesn't translate. Optional, like I said here, I would encourage you, if scaling internationally is, if you're really serious about it, you need to start attending industry events in that market. Again, I've used the analogy of being a European agency expanding internationally. So really look at some of the bigger events like Shop Talk, ETail, NRF, Shopify Summit, all of those bigger ones, KBOS, the Claudio that's coming up next month. And leverage those events and find out who you have connections with at those events, and start to like grow a network. We have our agency community, and it's a wider international community of about 20,000 agencies distributed all over the world. A more private, closer community of a few thousand, and then a very active community of a few hundred. But we know the amount of times in our online portal that we have for our private community, the amount of times I get selfies, or on WhatsApp, I get selfies from people like, oh, I just bumped into this guy, or we deliberately met up with each other and we're going here and we're doing this stuff together, which is awesome. And really that's what you want. A lot of the agencies that have scaling internationally has been their priority, and they've joined our community, and they just kind of piggybacked all of the goodwill that we already have. We have Shop Talk Vegas, We do an industry event at an Irish bar every year. Last year, we had upwards of 800 people attend that in a couple of hours. So it's like that kind of stuff where you can really maximize and leverage or ride the coattails of other people who've already paved the way and already have good favor in the industry. I don't know that I have good favor, but I have something. I have a reputation, that's for sure. And it's allowed a lot of the agencies that have been looking to penetrate the US market to come in and hit the ground running with somebody who already is trusted, and then is able to then turn around and say, look, I trust these guys or I trust these girls and you should connect with them. I think they're going to be a really good contact to you guys. So that works really well. And then making sure, and this is an extra step, a lot of people don't really do this, but I think it's incredibly valuable, is internal partner playbooks. So making sure that you have your enablement ready. So it means that when you're collaborating with those new partners, strategic partners, strategic aligned complementary agencies, tech partners, platform partners, they have a small plug and play one pager or playbook on who you are as an agency. What does your ICP look like? What is your method of working? What sort of tools are you using? Like all of this sort of stuff. So it means they have a better insight into what kind of brands would you want to work with and be a good fit for you, based on the people that they're speaking to. So it means that when they make that connection, it's going to be so much easier. So that's the second phase. So you're roughly up to 6 months, 5 or 6 months now, depending. And again, that's why I'm saying when it comes to skating internationally, this is not just a reactive, it kind of just happened by accident and then it just exploded. You really need to be very intentional about your efforts. And then the final phase then, which is a lot broader, is about execution and strategy. So it's like a game of chess. So you're executing on what you've learned. You're being strategic about the moves that you're making. You're being strategic about the people that you're hiring, the people that you're having conversations with, the people that you're working with. And that's something usually typically in the second half. So the second half of the year. So let's say first 6 months, January through June, you focus on foundations and then putting all the connections in place, like kind of like a farm. You're going to sow all the seeds. And then in the second half of the year, then you're starting to get your harvest and you're starting to be very strategic about, okay, well, these plants work really well. These ones really work really well, and so on. So at that stage, then you really need to consider adjusting your sales strategy. So making sure that the market that you're targeting is your sales strategy is aligned with that specific market. Also, you want to make sure that your pricing is in line with the market. I understand the temptation to undercut in order to be competitive. I personally don't think, depending on if you're doing a 10 or 15% undercut of the pricing, I think that could be a competitive advantage. I also would argue that it opens you up to people that are looking for the cheapest price, which for me, if you're the cheapest, you're going to be put out of business very soon. But I think that pricing is competitive to get your foot in the door and get some of those case studies under your belt. Totally understand. If you are focused on niching and scaling or being the number one in that specific niche, being the cheapest is not the strategy. They have this thing, pretty famous. They use it across lots of different industries. It's called the iron triangle. And you have time, you have money, and you have excellence. And the understanding is you can never have all three. So if you're going to the mechanic, somebody has banged into your car, totally busted. It's like the paint has come off and it's dented, and you come in and you're like, listen, I'm going on a road trip in 3 days. I need this done super quickly. So then you need to make a decision. Speed is a non-negotiable. Now, the two other ones that I have to choose, I can only choose one of the two. Is it excellence or budget? Now, if you say, I want it super fast, super cheap, and absolutely excellent, it's not, you're never going to get that. If you say, I need it 2 or 3 days, and I need this, I'm going to pick up a family member, I'm going to pick up, we're getting engaged or something like that, and I need it to be excellent service, just accept that it is going to cost you. So these are things that you need to take into consideration as you're scaling internationally. If you're going to pull back in budget, so you're going to be cheaper, we're going to have less money, but it means then excellence should never be a question. You should always offer an excellent quality service. If you don't offer excellence, you're not going to be successful. So excellence is a non-negotiable. You're going to sacrifice on budget, which means you can do it cheaper, which means then it's going to take a little bit longer. And these are the levers that you pull. Once the budget is a non-negotiable and the excellence is a non-negotiable, then you need to think about what timelines look like. And when I say timeline, I mean sticking to your timeline. I had a call with an agency today, and they were talking about a lead that they were super excited about, super interested. This client has been in January, we're interested, ghost. And 2 months later, oh yeah, we're back again. Sorry, we were busy. And then ghost, nothing for a few months. And then, oh, here we are. And now we're the second or third or fourth time this year. Oh yes, no, it's very urgent and we're back again. And I said to the agency, I said, you need to send them a final email. You haven't heard back in 2 weeks. Send them a final email and say, this is my timeline. If you want me, you respond with this within this timeline. If you don't, the conversation is over. So you really need to be very assertive. So pricing being affordable initially to get your foot in the door, I understand. After that, you need to adjust it with the market. And then other things that you really need to take into consideration is making sure that the time zone, you're able to deliver a smooth and excellent quality service in the time zone that you're in. Obviously, when it comes to closing deals and keeping clients happy, time to close is super important. So really take into consideration potentially having somebody that's US. So again, we're scaling internationally and we're scaling from Europe over into the US. So what I would consider is if time zone and speed to respond is really important. And I have like 5 or 6 clients over there, and we're mostly able to service with the core European team because there's a crossover in times. Say most of our clients are in New York. Then what I would do is I would probably think about having probably like an account manager or project manager that's US based that can deal with client communications in real time. So these are things then that I would be starting to think once I have a client base. And then potentially, if I'm at that stage, I would then probably consider whether setting up a US team or office would make sense. I think typically when you're doing 250 to 500K a year from the US clients, I think it makes sense to then start considering setting up a US entity. So that is the how. Again, you're going to have access to all of these slides after, but ultimately you're laying the foundations and validating the proof of concept. Then you're focusing on your positioning and building your network into that new market. And then from the second half of the year, from then month 6 onwards, roughly, you're then focused on your sales efforts, executing and hiring strategically to make sure that you're aligned with the market. So you can see here, this is not a quick fix. This is not something that happens overnight. This is a very intentional, slow, methodical process. If done correctly, it can be very successful. And then finally, what can you expect? And I think that this is the one that causes people a lot of issues because they have misaligned expectations. And a lot of occasions, not enough due diligence is done into the foundation stage. They saw an opportunity. They helped a current client with international expansion. They thought, I can do this. International expansion, this seems perfect for me. I have a case study. I've done it before. I'm a genius. Let's go. Then they try marketing to people internationally, or they say to that international client, oh, can you make some connections? Then they start speaking to people. The team then burns out, things fall flat in their face. The service then falls apart, or they don't get results quick enough. And then they say, okay, I'm not wasting any more time and money. So that's why what to expect is having a realistic expectation or realistic mindset on what success looks like. In reality, now this number is more or less similar to launching a new service. So when you're launching a new service or you're launching into a new market, launching a new service, I would say you probably need to invest at least 6 months before you expect to see results. Launching into a new market, it's somewhere around 6 to 12 months. So let's say 9 months. Now, if you're not seeing results launching into new markets, you're not starting to see traction, you're not starting to get more referrals from your partners you're making over there, you're not starting to come up in conversations more and more. If you're not willing to wait that amount of time, you're not ready. Like this is not going to work for you. And you have to be willing. So I want to, and you have to be able. I have the resources, which is why I talked about earlier. If you don't have, I would say 6 to 9 months of cash flow put aside. So 50K a month times 6 or 9 in the bank or access to credit. If you don't have access to that money, then you're not going to feel comfortable waiting until you start to see the results. It's just like anything, it's going to take you're trying to lose weight, or you're trying to grow something in your garden, or you're whatever, it's going to take time before you see results, but you need to be consistent and you need to be patient. And that's where the results come from. So like I said here, pipeline maturity takes time. This is not a silver bullet. This is not a quick fix. This is not an overnight solution. You might get lucky and have one thing happen really quickly and you're successful, and you think that you can just multiply that, and it doesn't. So for me, what does success look like? For me, success looks like 2 or 3 anchor clients. So those are clients that you know are locked in. They love the work that you do. They praise the team all the time. They're quite happy to share with other people how amazing they think it is to work with you. So having 2 or 3 of those anchor or flagship clients is a key definition of success. Having sustainable gross margins or profit margins after everything's done. So that means you're not financially relying on the headquarters. So I've got a UK-based agency, for example. If my UK P&L is responsible for making that new market profitable, it's not profitable. It's not a success yet. Additionally, success looks like having established partnerships and channels. So whether that comes down to complementary agencies, partners with platforms where you have contacts there with other tech companies that you're working with, strategic consultants that are working specifically with brands within your vertical. Like there's a combination of different ways that you can build and grow your local channels. So if I have those established and they're repeatable and kind of reliable, and we're building that relationship, to me, that's successful. And then finally, operationally, if the process is easy, so everything is flowing, everything's running like clockwork, you're not having issues with communication, you're not having issues with billing, your team are not having issues managing all of the tasks internally on different time zones. If that is all running easily, if you're constantly running into issues like, oh no, we forgot to reply to the client, we didn't get the invoice out on time, oh, I totally forgot that we set a call for 3 o'clock in the morning for her. If you're still coming into those situations over and over and over again, and there's like small mistake, it means that the operations is not successful. And then once you start to see traction, so let's just assume you're starting to see all of these little flags or indicators that you're being successful. You've got your flagship clients. You're starting to see sustainable growth margins. You've got reliable referrals and partners in that new market, and things are just running like clockwork. Like you don't even realize that you have a European side and a US side. It's just all running so smoothly. Once that happens, it's time to then invest. It's time to double down. So double down on more case studies, more testimonials, working collaboratively with some of the brands that your flagship or your anchor brands that you have out there, doing webinars, doing stuff in person. Then you double down on standardizing all of your onboarding and delivery playbooks, not just for the clients, but also for the team members. And then I would say at that stage, now this is at 9 to 12 months, that's when you start investing in 1 or 2 local key hires. My advice in order to scale in that new market would be to focus on hires with people that are already established and already have a reputation. I have one of my agencies that I've worked with for the last year or so, and the agency owner has been flying internationally all over the place in order to kind of build a reputation of the agency on an international scale, because he's very well known in his market. And we've now just made a very expensive investment into somebody who has got a fantastic reputation in the market that we're really looking to double down on. When that gets announced, it is going to make shockwaves in the industry, because this person is very, 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 very reputable, but not known for this role in our industry. So it's going to be super interesting to see this person, who's very well respected, very well liked, very connected, now come over to the agency side and, really hit the ground running. I feel confident. I think it's a really great hire. Of course, I was involved in it, so I know it's going to be great. So I think the important thing is, where do you go from here? Like, what is first steps? And I think for a lot of people, it's kind of not knowing. You want to go in that direction, but you're just not exactly like, what do you do first? It's just putting one foot in front of the other. So ultimately, this comes down to building your credibility, having market leadership, and having expertise. Like I said multiple times, this is not a quick fix. So deciding whether to expand or not expand internationally, you're not doing it because if you're telling me, I'm scaling into the US market because I need new business. If I don't get new business, if you have a problem here, you have a problem there. It's just like if you're in 3 or 4 relationships where you keep the relationships keep failing, or friendships, they keep failing over and over again, starting a new relationship is not going to help anything because you have a fundamental issue that every single time you get into a new relationship or into a new market, it's going to keep failing because that issue is still there. So making sure that the reason for expansion is right. If you do it correctly, and you do it, when I say correctly, I mean to be very intentional. If you are very intentional, it absolutely can significantly grow your business. It can lead you to bigger clients, open bigger doors, much higher budgets, and ultimately a bigger valuation or a potential bigger exit, or much more interesting exit opportunities if it's done intentionally. If you have a roadmap of where you're going and you're taking step by step and you don't get distracted with all of the other stuff that's around you, and this is the path I'm going, it can be very effective, but you have to stay on course. And of course, timing and positioning matters. So really focus, it can be the right idea at the wrong time. So making sure that the timing is right and your positioning is very clear and you're focused on the stuff that you do really well and you're building, you have the end. So this is where I want to go. This is what I want to achieve. And then you're working back from there. So instead of saying, this is where I want to go, and then let's just see what happens, not a good strategy. So I think that's it. We're almost at the hour now. Let me see. I'm going to open to the chat. If anybody has, there's maybe some people, how do I do this? Some people that have already potentially seen this call before. I'm not sure, or seen this presentation before. But are there any specific questions that anybody has? Anybody who's not connected with me, I feel like most of you should be, but anybody who's not connected with me, just scan this QR code. It should take you to my LinkedIn account. I haven't tested it, so I don't know if that's accurate. If it's not accurate, then just find me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email.